Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind.
You know what's on my mind?
Don't even wanna know
You
what's
know what's on my mind? On my mind? Goat versus fish.
Know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind.
I got goat versus fish on it all the time. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on it all the time. Yeah, you know I'm a goat, but you didn't really know. I was chilling on the fence, but I'm back again. Yeah, you wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on it all the time. Yeah, I wake up, it's a versus. Go to sleep in, it's a versus. Wake up, it's a versus. Go to sleep, it's a versus. Always a versus. Goat versus fish is always up in my head. It's like I didn't know it was there before, because it's always goat versus fish and it never wasn't goat versus fish. It's always on my mind, always on my mind, always on my.
Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know
What's on my mind? Oh, I wake up, it's goat versus fish, go to sleep. It's goat versus fish, I eat. It's goat versus sleep, I eat. It's goat versus fish, I wake up. It's goat versus fish, I go to sleep. It's goat versus fish, I go to the bathroom and it's goat versus fish? Nah. But yeah, it's goat versus fish all the time. 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 Goat versus fish all the time. It's goat versus fish all the time. It's goat versus fish all the time. It's goat versus fish, yeah, only thing you don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. It's goat versus fish all the time, all the time. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. It's time to take a dab.
Goat. Fish. Goat. Fish. Goat. Fish. Goat. Fish. Cuban Beat, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. If you're feeling adventurous, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Say Fuzzy Pickles, welcome to Goat vs. Fish.
Goat versus Fish would like you to save that versus.
You like that? That was a good versus.
It would make an excellent promo for Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish is on my mind. Goat versus Fish.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. There we go, let's do it again.
Don't even wanna know what's on my mind.
You wanna know what it is?
Don't even wanna know what's
You know
on my
it,
mind.
you know it. It's goat versus fish, versus fish.
Don't even wanna know
Oh,
what's
yeah,
on my mind, on my mind.
Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on it all the time. Wake up, it's goat versus fish, go to sleep. It's goat versus fish, go to bed. I already said that, but guess what? It's always goat versus fish all the time, all the time. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on it all the time. I wake up, it's goat versus fish, go to sleep. It's goat versus fish, I eat. Goat versus fish, I eat. Goat versus fish, wake up. It's goat versus fish, go to school. It's goat versus fish, I go to the pool and hang out and I see my friends and it's goat versus fish all the time. It's goat versus fish all the time. It's goat versus fish all the time. Yeah, goat versus fish all the time. And you don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on it all the time. Wake up, it's goat versus fish, go to sleep. It's goat versus fish, I eat. It's goat versus fish, go to the bathroom and it's goat versus fish. Nah, but it's goat versus fish all the time. 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 It's a versus, always a mighty versus. Such a mighty versus, such a mighty versus. Holy shit's a versus. Goddamn, it's a versus. You know it's a versus. I'ma grab all your freaking verses and put 'em in my pocket. Put 'em in my pocket. I'ma put 'em in my pocket. Don't believe it. It's goat versus fish. you see it. It's goat versus fish, you eat it. It's goat versus fish, you be it. It's goat versus fish.
Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. Don't even wanna
All right, here we go. Here we go. You know it. Everybody has this. You know what? Yeah. You join the verses on Twitch, you leave it, go to bed. You're like, oh my god, I got the verses in my head. I wake up the next day, I'm like verses all the time. I go to eat, I go to sleep, I got goat versus fish on my mind, on my mind. Goat versus fish on my mind. I can't stop thinking about it all the time. God damn, it's always goat versus fish versus fish. Why does it always have to be a versus? Because it's goat versus fish all the time, all the time. It's goat versus fish all the time, all the time. It's a celebration, it's a celebration, it's a celebration, it's a celebration. Celebration for fish, celebration for goats, celebration for fish, but you never.
Never wanna be on the fence. You never wanna be on the fence. Even though I was on it before, I'm back and I'm up. So you never wanna be. You never wanna be on the fence because you know what happens when you hit the fence. You hit the error.
Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. It's goat versus fish all the time, all the time. Don't even wanna know what's on my mind, on my mind. I got goat versus fish on my mind all the time. God damn it, it's always a versus. I don't want it to be, but guess what? I don't get to choose it. You don't get to choose when it's goat versus fish because it's all the time. It always wasn't, always ever. It will be, and it's gonna be, even if you think it's not. And you might come in and you're like, damn, it's not a versus, but you might challenge the verses. You might question the verses, but you will never triumph. You will never triumph because it's always goat versus fish, even when you say it's not. Goat versus fish all the time. I always got it on my mind, on my mind. Go to the goat versus first fish. Bochi, 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 boca, basso, don't be a bone. Yeah, you want, yeah. You know you wanna buy all of their merch. Yeah, you wanna buy all of their merch. Yeah, they got some pins, got some stickers, got some patches, got some other stuff you wanted, got some t-shirts and you got it. Yeah, spend all your verses on goat versus fish. Spend all your verses on goat versus fish. Ooh, spend all your verses on goat versus fish. You spend your verses on goat versus fish. Why don't you buy it? Buy up all this stuff. Make him run out, so he has to buy more. Oh my god, he's running out. You gotta buy his shirt, gotta buy it.
Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Welcome to another mighty versus of Goat versus Fish. Make some noise for the goat! And make some noise for the fish! It's goat, it's fish, it's goat versus fish. Celebration, celebration for goat versus fish. It's time for another exciting versus of goat versus fish. And you know what that means, goat and fish. You know what that means, goat and fish. For you see, it has just come to be that recently. It has just come to be. For you see, goat and fish, it has just come to be that recently on the YouTube there came an apparition. An apparition of Goat versus Fish on NBC, on AGT, on season 19. Oh yes, it is true. Bullet Martian. Oh yes, it is true, Jackie Poo. It is true, the Everything Man. It is true, Say Fuzzy Pickles. It is true, Cuban Beat. It is true. If you're feeling adventurous, Goat vs. Fish would never deceive you. And every verses we tell you, Goat vs. Fish. It is Goat vs. Fish. Slam Jambert celebration. Welcome to another critical verses of Goat vs. Fish. This is a critical verses. This is a critical verses, and we're calling all goat and fish. We're calling all goat and fish. We're calling all goat and fish. Calling all goat and fish. Critical verses. Now, goat versus fish, the goat fish. Goat versus fish, the goat fish has entered a negotiation with NBC on AGT on Goat versus Fish. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Lautrec Fish. Fish is back in the verses. We've got Goat, we've got Fish. It's a celebration. It's a celebration. So Goat versus Fish would not dare, Goat versus Fish would not dare publish the clip of AGT on the Goat versus Fish YouTube. No. Goat versus Fish would tell you to wait until reruns on Televerses and to watch Goat vs. Fish AGT Season 19 Episode 5 on Peacock, streaming live on Peacock. But it seems that some random goat or fish out there in the interwebiverse has published the entirety of Goat vs. Fish's appearance on AGT on their own YouTube channel. How dare they? How dare they publish Goat vs. Fish in its entirety on AGT? Why, if you just search YouTube for Goat vs. Fish on AGT, if you just are casually and humbly versing on YouTube Goat vs. Fish on AGT, you may just find a 1 minute and 20 or so second clip of Goat vs. Fish full appearance on AGT. You might just find it. How dare they? How dare they? It was not their verses to publish. No, that belonging to AGT and NBC and Goat vs. Fish and Goat vs. Fish. Far be it from Goat vs. Fish, far be it from Goat vs. Fish to tell you in the chat to go and search YouTube for Goat vs. Fish on AGT and to go and to find that clip and to like it and to comment on it in support of Goat vs. Fish. To like it and to comment on it in support of Goat vs. Fish. Far be it from Goat vs. Fish to tell you to like and comment on that verses in support of Goat vs. Fish. But of course, we always like when you like Goat vs. Fish, and we always like when you support Goat vs. Fish. You wouldn't dare go and search for Goat vs. Fish on AGT on YouTube and like and comment on that verses, would you? You wouldn't dare. Aww. You wouldn't dare, would you, by the honor of Goat vs. Fish? By the honor of Goat vs. Fish? As a matter of verses, if you, as a hypothetical verses, if you were to go to this musication video, Goat vs. Fish. If you were to go and search for Goat vs. Fish on AGT on YouTube and leave a commentation on that verses, we wonder what might your comment be? We wonder what your comment might be. Artman, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Peaceful Gangsta, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Butch Coast, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Someone told me to get rid of hiccups, you have to tell yourself you're a fish, but little did they know, I've been telling myself that for a month now. You have. You've been stout fish. Stout A butch fish. A butch fish. A butch fish. Butch fish. Be careful with that verses. Be careful with that verses. Butch Coast 69. Butch Coast 69. So goat and fish. So goat and fish. Here is goat versus fish. Here is goat versus fish. Here is goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Here is goat versus fish to tell you. Here's goat versus fish to tell you. Whatever you do, do not click the link in the chat. Do not click the link in the chat. Do not click the link in the chat. Doorway Sniffer, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Do not click the link in the chat. Far be it from you to go to that YouTube video and watch Goat vs. Fish on AGT in its entirety. Goat vs. Fish cannot endorse it. And to like it, and to leave a comment on it in support of Goat vs. Fish. Oh, my verses. Oh, my verses. Oh, my verses. Oh, my verses. Butch Coast says, so many goat, not enough fish. So many goat, not enough fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. This has been a critical versus. And Goat vs. Fish has been looking at this goat and this fish. And they are a fine goat and fish. They are a fine goat and fish. But we have been thinking maybe every once in the verses we should alter the goat and fish to be another goat and fish. Just for the sake of goat versus fish. Just for the sake of goat versus fish. Or maybe, thinks goat versus fish, maybe the goat and fish appear. Maybe the goat and fish appear as we gain verses, But why don't we for verses now? Why don't we just change the goat and fish? Fade that verses. Fade that verses. Fade that verses. Fade that fish. Fade that fish. Fade that fish. Fade that fish and fade this fish. Fade that fish. Fade that fish. Fade that fish. So why don't we add a couple more? Let's just to change the verses. Oh wait, that's the same fish. It's the same fish. It's the same fish that was always in the verses. Celebration. Jay Garner, hi, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Celebration for fish and congratulations for AGT. Indeed. But that is a different goat. That is a different goat. So let's have this. Let's have this new goat. Let's have this new goat. Just to have a slightly different verses in Goat vs. Fish. And let's search for another fish. Let's search for another fish. Surely we have another fish in this verses. Surely we have another fish in the verses. We know we have other fish. We know we have other fish in this verses. Celebration for fish. Ooh, let's get this fish. Let's get this fish. Let's get that fish. Let's get that fish. Celebration for fish. That's fish 2. Let's copy fish 2. Let's go to the true verses. Paste that verses. Put it in Goat vs. Fish. Put it in Goat vs. Fish, and we'll put it here with this fish. And we shall embiggen this fish. And now let's take this fish, and maybe we should just have more goat and fish. More goat and fish is always a fine verses. So why don't we just take some fish? Let's take this fish. Why replace the goat and fish when we could just have more goat and fish? So let's just add some fish. So many goat and fish are watching. They're watching Goat vs. Fish. So let's take this fish, and this fish is in the verses. This fish is in the verses too. Celebration for fish. So now we have two fish. Two fish in the verses, two fish in the corner of the verses. And now let's have two goat. Let's have two goat in the corner of the verses. Just like this. Just like this. More goat, more fish, more goat versus fish. Then we'll get to the second goat. Second goat. Second goat, and we just... More goat, more fish. More goat, more fish. And there we are, goat and fish. We have more goat and we have more fish. It's a brilliant verses. It's a beautiful verses. Why not just add more goat and fish to goat versus fish? Every single verses. Don't you agree? Don't you see? The verses becomes more powerful by simply adding goat and fish to create more goat versus fish. Doorway Sniffer says, oh, I'm behind on my goat versus fish lore. Oh, there is so much more. Oh, there is so much more. This is how you do it. This is how you do it. This is how you get through it. Let's put up something in the new verses in the rear of the verses. Goat and fish. Oh, that's a beautiful verses, but let's... we're feeling like goat versus fish this verses. We're feeling like goat versus fish. We're feeling like goat versus fish this verses. More goat, more fish. Goat and fish, goat and fish. Goat and fish. Goat and fish and goat and fish. Goat and fish and goat and fish. Goat and fish and goat and fish. So by any verses, goat and fish. So by any verses, goat and fish. So by any verses, goat and fish. This link in the chat, goat versus fish, would never tell you to follow this link in the chat. And goat versus fish would never tell you to like and to leave a comment in support of goat versus fish on that video. Goat versus fish would never tell you to do this. Goat versus fish would never tell you to do this. This is how you do it, says J-Sticks. This is how you do it. This is how you do. And Peon Stuff is watching Goat vs. Fish from the Kick celebration for the Goat and Fish on Kick and YouTube and on Twitch and all the verses. So let's count the Goat and Fish. Let's start the verses by counting the Goat and Fish, and we'll put on the classic verses. Goat and fish, it's time to count the goat and fish. Oh yes. Oh yes. Time to count the goat and fish. Time to count the goat and fish. And we have here the previous verses. And it was a triumph for fish, and it was a triumph for fish. Celebration for fish. But that's ancient verses now. We hope you enjoyed your triumph fish. We hope you enjoyed your fish. But that's old verses. We are listening to the Pandemonium Big Band. This is the verses of goat versus fish. It does smell like fish. It smells like real fish. We want to know if you're a goat or a fish. Are you goat or are you a fish? Are you a goat or a fish? We are asking you this. If you're on YouTube or Twitch or on Kick, this is a question of goat versus fish. Yes, feel the verses. And J-Stick says that I am a goat. It's written, it's wrote, and Slam Jambert with a fish. Bobby Dog is waving with goat. Yes, you can use your goat or fish emotes. And DJ Couch Guy says I'm a fish. Because I clean the women's bathroom stalls. We do not know if that makes verses at all. But we accept your declaration of fish. Dude the fish dude. With fish, Fish for fish for fish for fish for fish fish. Jay Garner, are you goat or fish? Doorway Sniffer, are you goat or are you fish? Artman, are you goat or are you fish? Jackie Poo, are you goat or are you fish? Peaceful Gangsta, are you goat or are you fish? We're doing declarations now. We're doing declarations now. Now is not the verses for hesitation. Now is not the verses for agitation. Butch Ghost with the fish declaration. Butch Ghost with fish. Butch Ghost with fish. Celebration. And what about you on kick? What about you on kick? Random TV fish, celebration more fish. And what about you on kick? We're talking to you, pee on stuff. Are you goat or are you fish? Jay Garner declares goat. Jay Garner declares goat. Celebration more goat. Third goat in the verses. Third goat in the verses. BBDH 187 says fish. Celebration for BBDH fish. And fish are leading to an early domination. Leading to an early domination, and TJ Nito says cephalopod octopus specifically. Fancitter, oh no, fancy, fancy, fancy. Octofence, Octofence. Octofence thinks that you're so great. You want more than 2 choices, you want 8. Well, it's too late. It's too late for TJ Neat. Goat vs. fish can't be beat, no, no. Going to work and I declare goat, Prue Lawrence, goat, Prue Lawrence, goat, Prue Lawrence, the goat, yes. We've got a goat of note. TJ Nito says, oh, octopods is the hill that I would die on, but if you're really on a hill, then aren't you really more goat? Seems like if you're on a hill, you're probably goat. Seems like you're probably goat. Bowser Big Bean Burrito, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Bowser Big Bean Burrito, are you goat or are you fish? Celebration. Celebration, celebration. And TJ Nito just being defiant. No, 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 no. The recalcitrant fence sitter. They don't know, they don't know. They don't know how to grow, they don't know how to grow, and they don't know how to show either. And TJ Nito just saying fancy things about, oh, it's a verses of heaven and heck. Please. The false verses of heaven and heck is just based on Goat vs. Fish. It all comes from Goat vs. Fish. And now you want to start making incantations of other verses you heard long ago? Oh, someone once told me sheep go to heaven. Now I will recite it to Goat vs. Fish. Please, you're making a fence of yourself. This non-fence that you acquired verses ago, you're now regurgitation to Goat vs. Fish like it's some kind of true verses just because it's a conventional fencedom that you've heard several billion times before. Goat vs. Fish is not impressed. The Everything Man, are you goat or are you fish? Goat vs. Fish for President 20,000,028. Deadpool, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? The Everything Man goat, celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. And TJ Nito is just mad with fenciness. TJ Nito's going, oh, what's wrong? No, my verses, what? What about purgatory? Oh, can I change the duck? The strange ramblings of a fence-sitter can scarcely be deciphered. Mad with fenciness. Mad with fenciness. Celebration for Kevin Hick 58 who follows Goat vs. Fish. Do we know who you are? Kevin Hick 58. You seem awfully familiar to Goat vs. Fish. Who could have imagined, says Bobby Dog, that NBC would fence so hard for the greatest political debate of our time? Well, they've got their own false verses. They've got their own false verses that they are tending to. They feel threatened by Goat vs. Fish. They feel threatened by Goat vs. Fish. LOL, Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. It's Kevin Hick the Goat. It's Kevin Hick the Goat. It's Kevin Hick the Goat. Are you fish or are you goat? Deadpool 9985. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? You are my hero. The hero of Goat vs. Fish. The hero of Goat vs. Fish. The hero of Goat vs. Fish. Celebration for the rather heroic Goat vs. Fish. Celebration for the rather heroic Goat vs. Fish. Proud fish. Adam S. is a proud fish. Adam S. is a proud fish. Oh, wait a versus. Oh, wait a versus. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Celebration, celebration. Found you. Site looks great. Appreciation. We are so pleased you found Goat vs. Fish. This is the place. This is the place. This is the space. Blasphemous would like to pick goat. Celebration for 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 goat. And Año declares goat. And Año declares goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration. Great. I broke the tie. You broke the tie. Yes! Goat starts leading now. Goat starts leading now with 7, with 8, with 6, with 8, with 8 to 6 for goat. With 8 to 6 for goat. AGT didn't even try to understand Goat vs. Fish. We think that Simon tried to understand Goat vs. Fish. Simon contemplated Goat vs. Fish, thought about Goat vs. Fish, imagined Goat vs. Fish. 2 Goat vs. Fish? What more could we want? 3 Goat vs. Fish. 3 Goat vs. Fish. Well, listen, that's why we have this versus. We have 2 goat and 2 fish, and we're just going to add goat and fish. We're just going to keep adding goat and fish to the verses. 2 goat and fish. Goat always leads. Actually, fish won last versus. Fish won last versus. Celebration to Kevin Hick, who follows Goat vs. Fish. Kevin Hick, who follows Goat vs. Fish. Our latest follower of Goat vs. Fish. Our latest follower of Goat vs. Fish. TJ Nito says, "Can I switch up again technically?" Listen, you are just wasting the verses of Goat vs. Fish, TJ Nito. You're just wasting the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Just wasting the verses of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish, Goat vs. Fish, and Goat vs. Fish, and Goat vs. Fish. Fence sitters are like German sausage jokes. They're the worst. Ooh, we're not sure that we really understand. We're just not sure that we really understand what it is you were trying to say to Goat vs. Fish. Goat and fish, goat and fish, goat and fish, goat vs. Fish. What about all you chatters on Kick? We have not seen a single declaration from Kick. How they say to Goat vs. Fish, "Come over to Kick, Goat vs. Fish, please. Everything's better on Kick, Goat vs. Fish." And there you are in the chat, and you're not even declaring goat or fish. Viewer Collins says, "Celebration." Viewer Collins, are you goat or are you fish? Michael, whoever that is, says, "Fence sitters are like artists. They are the best and tastiest verses in the world." Tastier than goat or fish? We don't think so. Viewer Collins is fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Fish, 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 fish. And Exodore Knox says goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Fish. Delicious fish. Flano Julian says celebration for goat. At long versus Kick declares goat. At long versus kick declares goat, and with 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s, 10s, with 10 in the verses, with 10 in the verses. With 10 in the verses, goat has earned their first goat of the verse, has earned their first goat in the verse. So let's go get a nice Togenberg goat, and let's get our first goat. Make some noise. Make some noise for the first goat of the verses. Make some noise for the first goat of the verses as BBDH187 celebrates for fish in defiance of goat, in defiance of goat. It's our first goat. It's our first goat of the verses. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. We've got goat. We've got goat. We've got goat. 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 Maybe it's time to reach into the bag of goat. Why don't we reach into the bag of goat? Are you ready to reach into the bag of goat? Let's get some goat in the chat. Let's get some goat in the chat if you're ready to reach into the bag of goat. I just realized I'm fish and I'm eating salmon for dinner. I need to dine on goat. Birria. Goats in the bag. T-Bear 505. Are you goat or fish? Goat. Enyo with goat. Deadpool is cheering for goat. Exodor Knox is goating. It's time to reach into the bag of goat. It's time to reach into the bag of goat. It's time to reach into the bag of goat. It's time to reach into the bag of goat. Let's see what we can find in here. No, that seems like a fence sitter. Let's go deep in the bag of goat. And what do we have here? Yes. Yes. Oh yes, we've missed this goat. We've missed this goat. We've missed this goat. It's goat. Make some noise for goat. Make some noise for goat. Make some noise for the goat. It's one of Thor's goats. It's one of Thor's goats. And we think it's we know that their goat names are either Tooth Gnasher or Tooth Grinder. And but this is one of Thor's goats. Make some noise for Thor's goats. Make some noise for Thor's goat. And we know just how to verse it. We know just how to verse it. Celebration for Thor's goat. Now, Thor's goats, they verses in pairs, it is true. They verses in pairs, it is true. But for now, we're just going to go over to goat. Going to go over to goat, to the goat verses. And there's goat. We're going to put goat on the goat verses. Just like this. Oh, goat sort of hiding behind. Maybe we need to arrange these goat. You really have to verses about how you arrange the goat and the fish. Ugstray, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Danger Tater, are you goat or fish? Ugstray, are you goat or are you fish? Okay, let's have a look at this versus. Let's have a look at this versus. We've got goat. We've got goat, we've got goat. We've got... I feel like goat could... Well, we could just put goat. Goat. Well, maybe want to break up the brown goats. There's nothing fence about brown goats, but for the verses of variation and diversification. Look at these goats. Look at these goats. That's a... Maybe we need some elevation. Maybe we just need some... Maybe elevation is the verses. Maybe we need to elevate... Maybe we need to elevation that goat. How could we elevation that goat? We would need some verses of elevation to elevation the goat. Well, we could just grab one of these verses for now. We could just grab one of these verses for now. You know, one of these verses. You know, one of these verses. There's goat. There's a fine goat. There's a fine goat. Ooh, look at that horn. Bent horn goat. Come on, goat. Come on, goat. And then we've got goat and goat and goat. And then we can take goat like goat. Put goat. The smaller wow mom goat. Like this versus goat and fish. We sort of have a lack of fish. We should get some more fish. Come on, fish. Well, fish did win the previous verses. Maybe we should reach into the bag of fish. Maybe we should reach into the bag of fish. Maybe we should reach into the bag of fish. Flano Julian, celebration for Thor's goat. Indeed. We've got Sean625. Are you goat or are you fish? You say, I like the smell of fish rather than a nasty goat. Sean625. Are you goat or fish? Ham Mods goes fish. That's 8 fish. That's 8 fish. Slam Jambert still celebrating fish. Still celebrating fish. Celebration for fish. And Hugsray was filled with amazification. You can be goat if you want to. You can leave your friends behind. You can be goat if you want to. You can leave your friends behind. BBDH1187 says, I once thought I was a goat. I think there are many confused goats. There probably are. Ugsray wants to offer your appreciation for the shirt of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish sent it to me and the stickers. Yes! And if we reach 10 subscriptions, 10 new subscriptions on this stream, we will give away another shirt of Goat vs. Fish. Danger Tater goes fish. Danger Tater goes fish. Sean625 going fish. And that makes 10 fish. And that makes 10 fish. 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 So let's get a fish, and then let's go into the bag of fish. We think you're going to like this versus his fish. Goat versus fish is a long versus, and that requires long goat and long fish. Fish this versus makes a noise for mahi mahi. Makes a noise for mahi mahi, getting a bit screen greened out there. But there it is. There's the mahi mahi fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Adam S. is still lamenting the loss of Willie Town this versus, and we do not deny it, and we do not deny it. And we do not deny it. But it's still Goat versus Fish. 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 Hey Kevin Hick, are you still in the verses? This is Goat vs. Fish versusing Kevin Hick. Are you in the verses? We have something to show you. So we have goat and we have fish, but now let's reach into the bag of fish. Let's reach into the bag of fish. Fish, make some verses in chat if you're ready to reach into the bag of fish. If we're ready to reach into the bag of fish, we want to hear it. Fish, 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 fish. Let's go into the bag of 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 fish. Triumph for goat, says Space Coyote, says Triumph for goat. Ooh, what's this? Ooh, yes, we know that. We recognize that fish. What about this? Oh, that fish. Ooh, that's a fish. What's this? Oh, that fish. Oh, that's a classic fish. We think we got a nibble, Goat and Fish. We think we got a nibble. We think we found the fish. Make some noise for the fish! Make some noise for the fish! Fish, 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 fish. And that's just one fish in the bag of fish. That's just one fish in the bag of fish. That's just one fish. One fish in the bag of fish. One fish in the bag of fish. Glub Glub says Sammy kind of life, a semi-harmed kind of life. Semi-harmed kind of life. Are you goat or are you fish on YouTube? Are you goat or fish? And be sure to subscribe to Goat vs. Fish. Fish, 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 fish. Make some noise for the fish. Make some noise for the fish. Make some noise for the fish. All of these goat and fish have been gifts to Goat vs. Fish. If you wish to send a gift to Goat vs. Fish, you can exclamation tip in the chat, and you can give a tip to Goat vs. Fish. And it will help the funding of acquiring more goat and fish like these to partake in the verses of Goat vs. Fish. So many goat and fish. So many goat and fish, they do not have a home, goat and fish. They do not have a place to verses. But Goat vs. Fish is here. Celebration! Ugstray with 10 verses contribution to Goat vs. Fish. Celebration for
Extra
fish!
contribution $10 to Goat vs. Fish. Celebration. Celebration for the one true versus. Celebration for goat, and celebration for Goat vs. Fish. Curse onto the fence sitters.
What a versus! 10 versus American dollars for goat. 10 versus American dollars for goat. That's 1,000 verse points for goat, and that's not all. And that's not all for your contribution, for your 10 versus American dollar contribution to Goat vs. Fish. The first 10 versus American dollar contribution on the stream of Goat vs. Fish now gets to be part of the scrolling marquee of Goat vs. Fish. Yes, you too can buy ad space on Goat vs. Fish. We're just waiting for it. Ah, there's the verses. Your verses here, 1,000 bits or 10 versus American dollars. You have made a 10 versus American dollar contribution to Goat vs. Fish. What do you want your message to say? We keep it a short verses, but a fair verses. What do you want your verses to say here in the televerses of Goat vs. Fish? Place it in quotation. Place it in quotation so Goat vs. Fish knows. So Goat vs. Fish knows. Celebration. Celebration for your contribution to Goat vs. Fish. For your contribution to Goat vs. Fish. For your contribution to Goat vs. Fish. And a verse American dollar donation of 10. A verse American dollar donation of 10. Why isn't it saying who made it to Goat vs. Fish? We know we saw it, but it should just tell Goat vs. Fish. Recent verses. Ugstray. Ugstray says Goat is the one true verses. Okay. 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 Goat is the one true verses. And if you want a new message to appear, it will cost you 1,500 bits. 1,500 bits. To get another verses. But there it is. Goat is the one true verses. Goat is the one true verses. Goat is the one true versus is now in the scrolling marquee of Goat versus Fish. Yes, you make Goat versus Fish. You are part of Goat versus Fish. But let's go into the verses. Oh, Fish! Oh, Fish! We just spent verses! We just spent verses setting up those goat! We just spent verses setting up those goat! How... Fish! Fish! Yes, that's how he versus the goat. Then how he versus the goat. Yes, that's some goat versus fish. Fish! 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 Fish, fish, fish. And that's just how it's going to be for now. And if you don't like it, Goat, well, you can just blame it on Fish. You can just blame it on Fish. This is what happens on Goat versus Fish. This is what happens on Goat versus Fish. The Space Coyote, thank you, Goat versus Fish, says thank you, Goat versus Fish. For being Goat versus Fish. We are Goat versus Fish. We are.
Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish.
Tsunami Bit with 100 bits. 100 bits. Tsunami Bit the Fish. Tsunami Bit the Fish with the tsunami wave crashing into Goat. Fish, 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 fish. Now, Goat and Fish, once again, we must remind you. Goat and Fish, once again, we must remind you. Celebration. 200. What? Oh, my verses? 200 bits. 200 bits. And Batiality says Celebration for Fish. Fish is coming back in a big verses and 200 bits for Fish. That's 300 for Fish. That's 300 for Fish. That's 300 for Fish. That's 300 for Fish. And look, Wow Mom's Fish is getting in on the verses. Fish, fish, fish. Fish, fish, fish. Tsunami Bit 300 for Fish. 300 for Fish. The Fish. The Fish double teaming the Goat. Double teaming the Goat. Fish, fish, fish. Oh, Fish. Picking up Goat. Picking up Goat. Picking up Goat. And slamming Goat. And slamming Goat in the verses. Slamming Goat in the verses. It's a double team of Fish. It's a double team of Fish. And Fish just gloating over Goat. Just gloating over Goat. Fish just gloating over Goat. Look at what's happening on Goat versus Fish. Look at what's happening on Goat versus Fish. 300 bits for Fish. 300 bits for Fish. That's 600. That's 600 now for Fish. That's 600 now for Fish. And Lortec 445 is Fish. 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 Oh, Fish. Oh, Fish. Tsunami Bit with hundreds of bits. With hundreds of bits. Remember, do not forget your hydration. I am Mr. Black 89 Goat and Tsunami Bit with 25 bits. With 25 bits. 625 with 625. with 625. Blasphemous. Blasphemous. Just trying to lay into that fish. But I'm Mr. Black Goes Goat. Celebration for Goat. And Uncle Baby Bly. Welcome to Goat versus Fish. Uncle Baby Bly, whose first chat is goat. It's a baby Bly goat. It's a baby Bly goat. Goat and Fish, we have Uncle Baby Bly in the verses. Let's make some noise for all the baby goats out there. For all the baby goats. Make some noise for all the baby goats out there in the verses. Yes, yes. Uncle Baby Bly, we are pleased to have you here with Goat vs. Fish. And we hope you consider to follow Goat vs. Fish. We'd be very pleased if you follow Goat vs. Fish. And missing blue card goes Goat. Missing blue card goes Goat. Missing blue card goes Goat. Hugstray, Goat. And 25 bits. Let us not forget 25 bits. 25 bits from Tsunami Bit. For fish. 25 bits for fish. That's 25 bits for fish. That's 25 Tsunami Bit with 50 bits. With 50 bits for fish. Tsunami Bit with 50 bits for fish. With 50 bits for fish. Huge verses. Huge verses. It's a tsunami of bits. It's a veritable tsunami of bits. 675 for fish. 675 for fish. And missing blue card is going Goat. All the verses is going Goat. All the verses. So Goat and Fish. And J-Rock Magoo goes Goat. J-Rock Magoo on kick goes Goat. Celebration for Goat. The verses continues. Fish, you are fish, says Lortech 445, and welcome back, Lortech, to Goat versus Fish. We like this versus. Isn't this a fun versus? Goat and Fish? Tsunami Bit with a gifted versus! And it's a tsunami, Goat and Fish. It's a tsunami, Goat and Fish. It's a tsunami, Goat and Fish. Gifted versus. Fish now exceed Goat in even the bits. Tsunami Bit, graduation by graduation, overtaking Goat, making a mockery of Goat. Oh, it was Ugstray with a 10 verse American dollar contribution, but now it's all in the fence with Fish. Just a couple more fish. By Nice versus J-Rock Magoo came into the verses. America's got fish. America's got Goat. America's got fish.
Do not take our American slogan and rip it off and throw a fish in the middle of it.
And J-Rock Magoo says for Simon the Fence Sitter. Now Simon actually spent some time pondering about Goat versus Fish. Are you Goat or are you a fish? Are you Goat or are you a fish? And with a gifted verses. For fish. The gifted verses for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish.
It's like a giant salmon smacking you in the face.
Celebration for fish, and we've got burned fish with the fish. We've got burned fish with the fish. We've got burned fish with the fish. We got burned fish with the fish. Burned fish with the fish. Fish are one fish away. One fish away from domination. From one fish away from total goat domination. One fish away in batiality and batiality with the fish. Batiality with the fish. And Tsunami Bit with the gifted verses. With the gifted verses.
What type of fish is this?
With the gifted verses. With the gifted verses of fish. With the gifted verses of fish. And it's a fence embarrassment for goat. It's a fence embarrassment for goat. Goat was just claiming last verses. Goat was just claiming. Goat was just claiming. Goat was just claiming that goat could not be defeated. And Tsunami Bit with another gifted verses. With another gifted verses. 2,175 for fish. 2,175 for fish. Goat. Feeling the blub of fish. Feeling the glug of fish. Feeling the fin of fish. Tsunami Bit making it versus. And Lore. Forgive Goat versus Fish. Lot Rec 445 with 1 bit. With 1 bit for fish. With 1 bit for fish. And T-Bear's fish, and T-Bear's fish. We counted your fish. We counted your fish. That's 2 gifted verses. That's 2 more gifted verses. And Ugstray going goat. Ugstray saying, no, not so versus fish. I'll match your 1 bit for fish. I'll match your 1 bit for fish. And we'll get 31 for goat. And we'll get 31 for goat. So goat going to put in a bit of a verses there. Goat going to put up a bit of a verses there. Goat and fish, we're about to return to Verselandia. We're about to return to Verselandia. We're about to return to Verselandia. And we're going to make this epic versus happen. We're going to make this epic versus happen. 2 gifted subs and a bit for fish versus 31 bits for goat versus 31 bits for goat. Tsunami Bits says 2 bits. Says 2 bits for fish. 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 And now comes the verses. And now comes the verses. And now comes the verses of the Battle of Goat and Fish. No, that's not the verses we wanted. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. That could be the verses. That could be the verses. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Extended. Yes. It's time for the battle of Goat versus Fish. If you drop a follow to Toxic 2 Faded, I'll drop more bits. How about if you drop more bits, I'll give a follow to Toxic 2 Faded. How about that versus? How many bits? We'll just have to see. Two gifted subs from Fish. 2 gifted subs from Fish. Slamming goat into second goat. Fish making goat sandwich. Fish making goat sandwich. Fish making goat sandwich. I have never seen anything like it before in my verses. I've never seen anything like it before. Run for the hills, goat. Run for the hills. Run for the hills, says Stong, says the fish, as the fish flipping the goat, fish flipping the goat, flipping the goat, fish flipping the goat, flipping the goat. And Lautrec with 94 more for goat, 94 more for fish to versus the goat. In comes Thor's goat with 31 bits, and with 31 bits, Thor's goat bit the fish. Gnawing and biting on fish. But then another gifted sub for fish. Another gifted sub for fish. And the fish re-bit the goat. And flung goat by the hoof. And 1 bit for fish, and 1 bit for fish, and 2 bits for fish. And a tail slapping down goat. The verses. Fish. Fish is making a move for the verses. 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 It's a big move for the verses. It's a big move for the verses. And Lortec with 94 bits, laying on top of goat, trying to keep goat, and Doge is just watching, going, confused, very confused Doge. And wooden goat and wooden Arizonan goat is just laying there wondering, what the fence am I doing here? What the fence am I doing here? Let's elevation the verses. Let's elevation the verses. Versus elevation. Butch Ghost with 10 bits for fish, even though the animation for 10 bits is that of a goat. It is 10 bits for fish. Look at the floating verses, and fish. Fish currently topping the verses. Butch Ghost with 10 bits, and fish is taking on the power of goat. Fish is taking on the power of goat. Goat is trying its best, but fish is returning versus. Fish with 30 bits for fish. 30 bits for fish and 94 bits for fish. 61, 94 bits. 5. Oh wait, that's goat. Oh, my versus. Oh, there was an accounting error in favor of goat. Did you see that happen on Goat versus Fish? Goat versus Fish didn't see that happen on Goat versus Fish. 30 bits for fish. 30 bits for fish. 30 bits for fish, 30 bits for fish, and 94 bits. 94 bits for fish, 94 bits for fish, goat and fish, 2,302 bits for fish. 2,302 bits for fish. And T-Bear with an admonition, can't we all just get along? Blasphemous is just feeling also salty about the fish. And Lortec says, follow toxic to faded. Says, follow toxic to faded. We understand and appreciate that you want Goat versus Fish to follow toxic to faded now. But there's a larger precedent at verses. We can't just have Goat and Fish coming into the chat and making demands and commands of Goat versus Fish. If Toxic 2 Faded wants a follow from Goat versus Fish, they'll have to earn it from Goat versus Fish, and that's the only verses. And it was written, and it was written. Toxic 2 Faded says fish, 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 fish. Celebration for fish, celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. But in any verses, we'll give Toxic 2 Faded. We'll give you a shout out for fish. We'll give you a shout out on Goat versus Fish. We'll give you a shout out on Goat versus Fish. How's that for a versus? How's that for a compromise from Goat versus Fish? How's that for a versus? Will Goat vs. Fish be at SD Comic Con this year, says Eldon. Hello, Eldon, and welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Eldon on the YouTube. Eldon on the YouTube asks Goat vs. Fish, will he be at SD Comic Con this year? Maybe. Probably. Likely. It would sure help if one of you wanted to pay $450 or $1,000 versus American dollars so Goat vs. Fish would get a badge to attend SD Comic Con this versus. It costs like 1 million verses to go there. It costs like 1 million verses. It costs 1 million verses, but then again, Goat vs. Fish as seen on America's Got Talent. We've got to see Goat vs. Fish. We think we've got to see Goat vs. Fish, the very talented Goat vs. Fish. IR somebody, can we raid Jubs? He was just mentioning fish. Can Jubs raid Goat vs. Fish? They were just mentioning Goat vs. Fish. IR somebody, you think Goat vs. Fish is just going to end this epic and mighty verses of Goat vs. Fish because you came into the chat of Goat vs. Fish? We see that you account creation in 2010. Do you think Goat vs. Fish was just versed yesterverses? You think Goat vs. Fish is just going to end the stream of Goat vs. Fish because you come in here and you tell Goat vs. Fish? You've been on Twitch for too long to know that that ploy isn't going to versus on Goat vs. Fish. But we do celebrate that they mentioned fish. We celebration that they mentioned fish. IR somebody, are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? T-Bear, this one's for you. Blub, 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 fish gang, rise up. So goat and fish, so goat and fish. So goat and fish, so goat and fish. Goat and fish, someone official P. Oh my verses. Oh my verses. We don't know about that. We don't know about that on Goat vs. Fish. And account created 11 minutes ago? Are you goat or are you fish? Missing blue card fish, missing blue card fish. Goat and fish. Did you know that someone has uploaded the entire set of Goat vs. Fish on America's Got Talent on YouTube? Did you know that this happened? Of course, Goat vs. Fish could not possibly endorse this. Of course, Goat vs. Fish could not possibly endorse this. After all, Goat vs. Fish has been seen on NBC, on AGT, and on Peacock, Season 19, Episode 5. So Goat vs. Fish could not possibly endorse this random upload. How could we? How could we possibly? Which is why Goat vs. Fish implores you. Which is why Goat vs. Fish implores you. You see this link? You see this link in the chat? Do not click this link. Do not click this link. Do not click this link and do not like that video and do not comment on it in support of Goat vs. Fish. Do not click the link, do not like it, and do not comment in support of Goat vs. Fish. You see that link there? Whatever you do. Why, if Goat vs. Fish were, if it were reverse versus, if it were the reverse versus, Goat vs. Fish would tell you to click that link and like the video and comment on it. Goat vs. Fish would tell you to click that link, like the video and comment on it. Goat vs. Fish would tell you to click that link, comment, and like upon it. But only if it was the reverse versus. As a matter of versus, don't click it, don't like it, and don't comment on it in support of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish, did you win the poll? We could have a look at that versus. We could try to have a look at that versus. Oh, Goat vs. Fish, no, do not report it. Do not report the video. If NBC wishes to report it, it is on NBC. We can leave it for NBC to do. You can leave it on NBC to do. Listen, video nipple, Goat vs. Fish has said what Goat vs. Fish has said. You may do whatever you wish. You may do whatever you wish. But Goat vs. Fish says do not report the video. You can let NBC handle that. Goat vs. Fish, Goat vs. Fish. Did Goat vs. Fish win the poll? We'll have to have a look at that versus. But before we look at that poll, we think... But before we look at that poll, Goat vs. Fish thinks that we should look... And we've got Trace the Haas. Welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Are you goat or fish? And Goat vs. Fish... There was someone else who joined Goat vs. Fish just a versus ago. Ah, I was thinking I hadn't seen you in a while. Glad this still goes down. Goat vs. Fish still goes down. Goat vs. Fish never stopped going down. Goat vs. Fish never stopped going down. All hail Goat vs. Fish. I shall now show all the support I can for Goat vs. Fish celebration. Trace the Haas. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Toxic 2 Faded, welcome to Goat vs. Fish. Goat or fish. And we know you want to see what's happened at Anime Expo, don't you? We know you want to see what happened on Anime Expo, don't you? So, let's go have a look at that versus. Celebration. Celebration. Goat for sure. Trace the Haas says goat for sure. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. We've got goat. We've got goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Oh, look, we've got Goat and Fish in this versus. Hello. Oh, they're watching the versus. Of course. Goat and Fish are watching the versus. So we know that you know that Goat vs. Fish just went to Anime Expo. And we know that you want to know. And we know that just how it go at Anime Expo. We know. We know, so we're going to show you a versus. Oh, and look, there's Goat versus Fish. Goat. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. You can't stop goat versus fish. You can't stop goat versus fish. And now we have verses before, and now we have verses before. So let's go back to this place. Let's go back to this place. Let's get some celebration in chat. Hey, it's Slarty Bart Fasty. I saw this dude on AGT, and I don't watch AGT. Slarty Bart Fasty, welcome back to Goat vs. Fish. Slarty Bart Fasty, are you goat or are you fish? So goat and fish, celebration for goat, missing blue card, celebration for goat. So who wants to see, make some verses in the chat if you want to see what happened to Goat vs. Fish at Anime Expo. Verses in the chat, goat and fish. Verses in the chat if you want to see to happen at Anime Expo what? Goat vs. Fish. Slarty Bart, that's your goat. Random TV with the verses, random TV with the verses. Random TV with the verses. Random TV with the verses, random TV with the verses. Random TV with the verses, blasphemous with the verses, blasphemous with the verses. Blasphemous with the verses, blasphemous with the verses. Yes, we want to keep your participation in Goat vs. Fish. Want to keep, oh, you just saw that verses, didn't you? You just saw that Goat vs. Fish was checking on how many viewers for Goat vs. Fish. Goat and Fish, we want to see the verses. We want to see the verses, Goat and Fish. We want to see the verses. We want to see the verses. We've got two verses. We've got random TV and we've got blasphemous. Did any of the animal people reply to what you said? Some of them, they might have. Some of them might have. We could check on that verses. But first, just the verses. First, let's have a look at the ultra-fast recap of Anime Expo with Goat vs. Fish. Now, in the previous verses of Goat vs. Fish on Twitch, Goat vs. Fish did a 4-hour review of Anime Expo, which you can find on YouTube. But for now, let's have a look at this versus. Now, it happened so fast to Goat vs. Fish. And we wanted the musications, but there it goes. But there it goes, Goat and Fish. Extra fast replay of Anime Expo with Goat vs. Fish. Let's try it again. So now we can have a look. Fish was there, Fish was there, Fish was definitely there. Goat vs. Fish can tell you this. This one, tabby.lift. This one, Goat vs. Fish encountered. And we took this picture with Goat vs. Fish. And they reposted Goat vs. Fish to over 1.1 million followers. This one reposted Goat vs. Fish to 1.1 million followers, Goat and Fish. You think that Goat vs. Fish, you may say to yourself, oh, Goat vs. Fish has been on AGT. Goat vs. Fish has 26 viewers in their live stream. Goat vs. Fish has totally made it. You made it, Goat vs. Fish! Well, Tabby.lift has 1.1 million followers on the Instantgram. Goat vs. Fish still has a long versus to go. Still a long versus for Goat vs. Fish. So we appreciate your continued participation in Goat vs. Fish. We can tell you this. This one, Polly Kim, who makes amazing musications. Polly Kim, who makes amazing musications and Causal Plays, they responded to a message from Goat vs. Fish, and though they only have several hundred followers, you might say, they accepted an invitation to collaboration with Goat vs. Fish. Right now they are in the Navy of Fish, or maybe they're headed for the Goat Locker and they need to finish their Navy-type verses. And then they said, we would love to collaboration and do causal play and play their musications on the stream of Goat vs. Fish. So, they are a goat. Oh, my verses. So, are you goat? Ah, Goat vs. Fish. Celebration. Are you goat or fish? Are you goat or fish? But let's have a look at Polly Kim, who follows Goat vs. Fish. And let's have a look at the kind of verses that they do. They really know to tickle that fence. They really know how to tickle that fence, don't they? They really know to tickle that fence, don't they? Or what about this? So they said they might join Goat versus Fish. We like this versus. We like this versus. We want an accordion on the living stream of Goat versus Fish. We want an accordion on the living stream of Goat versus Fish, and Goat versus Fish will not be denied. Emo Weeb the Simp, welcome back to Goat versus Fish. Emo Weeb the Simp, are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat? Or are you fish? Welcome back to Goat versus Fish. So that was some Goat versus Fish. That was Goat versus Fish. That was Goat versus Fish at Anime Expo. One more versus. So, Goat and Fish, if you want to like this very versus JoJo reference, well, look at reference. Look at this versus. Look at this versus JoJo versus Dio. The fence is going on here. What the? So we click it. Oh, Goat versus Fish. As you can see, Dio versus Kujo Jotaro is fish versus goat. And you can see here that Dio is the fish and Jotaro is the goat. Now you know. Now you know when you watch Jotaro and Dio that it's goat versus fish. Who is that? That's Goat versus Fish. That's Goat versus Fish. And that's Jotaro. And that's Dio. I see it now. I see it now. Goat versus Fish in JoJo. There's definitely some fish. There's definitely some fish references in JoJo. JoJo fish. There's definitely some mentions of fish in JoJo. There are so many references. There are so many references to goat and fish in JoJo. Of course. Of course there are. And let's not forget this. If you want to talk about JoJo fish references, don't forget about this. Don't forget about this. Oh, this one was always versusing the fish. This one was always versusing the fish. This one was always versusing the fish. Trying to hook you on the fence, it was. Trying to hook you on the fence. And it's Robert Olivares. It was cool meeting you. It was cool meeting you. I took the Dio and Jotaro pick. Celebration. I was fish. Celebration. Robert is in the chat. Goat and Fish. Over on YouTube. Well, guess what, Robert? We are so pleased to have you here on YouTube with Goat versus Fish. Robert, we appreciate you being here. You should subscribe to Goat versus Fish. A lot of the chatters exist on twitch.tv/GoatVsFish. So if you want to join the other chatters, you can go to twitch.tv/GoatVsFish. You may have to make an account if you are not already on Twitch. But if you want the adulation of all the other chatters who are watching Goat versus Fish, then go over there to twitch.tv/GoatVsFish and all that versus. Celebration. You will go to Twitch. Celebration. Go to Twitch. Follow Goat versus Fish and follow Goat versus Fish on Twitch. Goat and Fish, the very goat. Or fish. They are Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish. Are you goat or are you fish? Goat versus fish. Well, goat versus fish cannot endorse you getting so blackout drunk that you don't even remember that you saw goat versus fish. We cannot endorse this. We cannot endorse this, but here we are. Goat and fish, the one who took this very picture. The one who took this very picture may be coming all the way over to Twitch. They might just be. And they can tell you all about goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. And there they are again, and there they are again. And Robert on YouTube declares fish. Celebration. Pimp Daddy Shrek, welcome back to Goat versus Fish. Pimp Daddy Shrek. Now wait a versus. Pimp Daddy Shrek, we recognition you. We recognition Pimp Daddy Shrek from Anime Expo. Look at how they join Anime Expo. Pimp Daddy Shrek says, this is Robert. Pimp Daddy Shrek, this is Robert. Celebration. Pimp Daddy Shrek is the very one who took this very versus, who took this very picture of goat versus fish, who took this very picture of goat versus fish, who took this very picture of goat versus fish. So can we get some adulation? Can we get some celebration in the chat for Pimp Daddy Shrek? Some appreciation for taking this picture of goat versus fish. Can we do this, goat and fish? Can we do this, goat and fish? Can we do this, goat and fish? Goat versus fish. Oh, that's not the verses. Pimp Daddy Shrek _ There's the verses. And here they are, goat and fish. So why don't we give them a little shout out here on Goat versus Fish? Why don't we give them a little shout out here on Goat versus Fish? There's their account. You may do what you wish. Goat and Fish, it's Pimp Daddy Shrek, who took a picture of Goat versus Fish that's now on the Instagram and then again on the live streams of Goat versus Fish. It goes all around the verses. It goes all around the verses. It goes all around the verses. Thank you for being part of Goat versus Fish. Thank you for finding Goat versus Fish. The community of Goat versus Fish just expands and expands and expands. I'll upload all the expo pics this week. Did you take any other pictures of Goat versus Fish when Goat versus Fish was unaware that we should be waiting for? Did you take any other verses of Goat versus Fish? Secret verses? It's Redolent Thought. Hello, goats. Hello, fish. Hello, Vincenter. Make some noise for the goat. Redolent Thought is in the verses. You did not get any pictures of Goat versus Fish. You did not get any pictures of Goat versus Fish. But Goat versus Fish has been on America's Got Talent. Goat versus Fish is a totally important and somewhat arguably not quite famous, but almost Goat versus Fish. They overlook Goat versus Fish. They overlook Goat versus Fish. They overlook Goat versus Fish. And Redolent Thought says Howie Mandel is a national fence embarrassment. A national fence embarrassment.
The electric fence.
Make some noise for Redolent Thought. Redolent Thought is in the verses. Redolent Thought is in the verses. Redolent Thought is saying hello to goats. Redolent Thought, and to the fish, and even to the fence sitter. Redolent Thought, are you goat or fish? Redolent Thought, a great supporter of Goat versus Fish. Redolent Thought has quite the technologicalification type stream, and is always goat. We're going to give a shout out to Redolent Thought. We're going to give a shout out to Redolent Thought, and we're going to mark you down for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for goat. Celebration for Goat, and celebration to Pimp Daddy Shrek, who follows Goat versus Fish. That's the verses. That's the verses, Pimp Daddy Shrek. On YouTube, it is called a subscription, and on Lord Swank is raiding Goat versus Fish. Lord Swank raids 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 Goat versus Fish. Lord Swank, are you goat? Or are you, fish? Look, goat and fish, look, Lord Swank Raiders. Behold, goat versus fish. Goat versus Fish was on America's Goat versus Fish Talent. Goat versus Fish was on America's Got Talent. Goat versus Fish was on National Televerses. Goat versus Fish, it was 1 minute and 25 seconds of Goat versus Fish. It was a minuet and 25 seconds of Goat versus Fish. Celebration! Celebration! Celebration, celebration, and Lord Swank raids Goat versus Fish with 8. And that's 8. That's 800 versus points. That means 800 versus points for Goat. 1,831. That's for all 8 raiders from Lord Swank. Celebration, celebration. Celebration, celebration. A big Goat versus Fish shout out for Lord Swank. Celebration. You have to wait another 2 seconds for giving a shout out. Okay, we already did. Lord Swank! A shout out to Lord Swank. A mighty goat, a mighty goat! And Goat and Fish and Goat and Fish. Lord Swank, Goat versus Fish was just versing about how Goat versus Fish went to Anime Expo. Let's see what happened there. So it was a beautiful verses. It was a beautiful verses. Did I see Jesus? Did you? Oh, my verses, you saw this one that they called themselves Jesus. But guess what? Look at their Instantgram name. Look up there, look up to their Instantgram name. This is not the first verses we have encountered. Jesus Christ! At an exposition, they recognized Goat versus Fish, but look at their name, Land Trout. Land Trout is their first name, Land Trout. Land Trout! You know they're a fence sitter. You know they're a fence sitter, and look at how well Jesus is getting along with Stonks. Look at how Jesus is getting along with Stonks. Because Jesus is all about the profit, Goat and Fish. All about the profits, not like Goat versus Fish. Despite being a goat, the band Lake Trout was kind of cool. Lake Trout definitely sounds more like a fish. Are you certain about that, versus? It's Maddie Mutations. Did people at Anime Expo think Goat versus Fish was niche anime that they hadn't seen yet? Some did. Some did. Some think that we are Burger King until we insist that we are Goat versus Fish. It's quite tiresome versus, really. It's quite tiresome verses. It all makes sense now. Despite me being Goat, the band Lake Trout. Ah, you like the band Lake Trout. Yes. Goat and Fish. Here is Maddie Mutations, Goat and Fish. Go give Maddie Mutations. Just for the sake of verses, go give Maddie Mutations a follow here on Twitch. They do not do any living streams or any such verses, but who knows, maybe they might want verses. They do make contentment for Goat versus Fish. They do make contentment for Goat versus Fish. So that was Goat versus Fish. And guess what, Goat and Fish? Guess what, Goat and Fish? Guess what, Goat and Fish? Some goat or fish has uploaded Goat vs. Fish on America's Got Talent. Goat vs. Fish full performance, America's Got Talent. Someone uploaded it onto YouTube, Goat and Fish. We would not dare show it. We would not dare show it, Goat and Fish. Of course, Goat vs. Fish would insist that you watch on National Televerses or on the living stream service Peacock. Oh, we would insist that you do. 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 But Goat vs. Fish is merely giving you information. Goat vs. Fish is merely providing you information. You can go to this place and you can leave a comment in support of Goat vs. Fish. You can leave a comment in support of Goat vs. Fish. But by the honor of Goat vs. Fish, by the honor of Goat vs. Fish, Goat vs. Fish does not know who uploaded that verses. Goat vs. Fish did not give permission for that verses to be uploaded. And if NBC has offense with them, it takes offense, then you may do what you wish. You may do what you wish. It's beyond the power of Goat vs. Fish. It is beyond the power of Goat vs. Fish. The nation just wants to see Goat vs. Fish. The nation wants to see Goat vs. Fish. They will not stop until everyone has seen Goat vs. Fish. 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 We think it might be time for a song of Goat vs. Fish. It might be time for a song of Goat vs. Fish. How about a little song of Goat vs. Fish? How about a little song of Goat vs. Fish? For the sake of that verses. For the sake of that verses. Did you say offense or offense? What did Goat vs. Fish say? When you going back on AGT? Well, we would have to wait until season 20, and they would have to audition Goat vs. Fish. And Dr. Matt Destruction, are you goat or are you fish? Lord Swank with the radiation. Lord Swank with the radiation. Goat vs. Fish. Let us ponder this. Goat vs. Fish. When are you going back, Goat vs. Fish? Whenever the invitation, Goat vs. Fish. Whenever the invitation, Goat vs. Fish, or whenever we audition, Goat vs. Fish. Dr. Matt Destruction says, Goat for me, celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat, celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Celebration for Goat. Goat, Goat. Goat. Your goat is written. America's Goat Talent. America's Goat Talent. I didn't watch the link, but I think the judges were fence sitters. Well, they didn't choose Goat or Fish, not to spoil the verses. Goat vs. Fish couldn't possibly spoil the verses. They already spoiled the verses by not choosing Goat or Fish. A pick for Goat vs. Fish. A pick for Goat vs. Fish. Pick for Goat vs. Fish? Ah, we do. Terry did choose Goat, but Terry was not a judge of Goat vs. Fish. But we celebration Terry for choosing Goat. Celebration for Terry the Goat. Celebration for Terry the Goat. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Bailed in for 20 fish. Bailed in for 20 fish. Bailed in for 20 fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. Celebration for fish. So JoJo has put us in the verses. JoJo has put us in the verses. All this anime expo has put us in the verses. Celebration for fish. It's put us in a feeling a particular kind of verses. Put us in a particular kind of verses. And Peon Stuff is here with Goat versus Fish. Are you goat or are you fish on Kick? Are you goat or are you fish? Tell Goat versus Fish. Speak to Goat versus Fish. Speak to Goat versus Fish. Give the information to Goat versus Fish. Do not hesitation for the information to Goat versus Fish. Do not hesitation for the information to Goat versus Fish. It's just like Kick, isn't it? You get one chatter on Kick, and they're called Peon Stuff. And then they say, no, everyone, please come to Kick. Everything's better on Kick. Oh, my verses. Thank you for being part of Goat versus Fish. Thank you for being part of Goat versus Fish. In spite of all the offense. In spite of all the offense. All the old verses on the tomb, they do the sand verses, don't you know? If they move too quick, a fish or goat, they're falling down like a fence sitter. In the bazaar run by the Nile, they've got their goat and fish in hand. The gold crocodiles are fence sitters, oh no, they ate a man. Fancy types with their hookah pipes say fish or goat, fish or a goat. Are you a goat or a fish? The blonde goats take their trays, they spin around and they verse the fish. They've got the moves, goat or fish, they'll drink with the fish and verse again. All the school of fish, sick of books, they like the punk and the metal bands. So they go see Goat versus Fish, playing with the green jello band. All the kids are baby goat and goat or fish, yeah. Goat or fish, yeah. Sit like a fence sitter. Slide your fins up the stream and bend your back, shift your arms and pull it back. Life is so hard, goat or fish, you try to choose but you just don't know. If you want to find all the cops, they're hanging out in the donut shop. Are the pigs a goat or a fish? We just do not know, we just don't know. Goat versus fish, oh the verses continue. Yagi tai saka, naki maima, yagi kasakanaka. A fish or goat, they're in the verse like Egyptians. All the goats are versus fish, say goat or fish, yeah. Goat or a fish, yeah. Are you a goat or a fish? Are you a goat or a fish? Celebration! Welcome to Eldon Plays, who says, I finally understand the verses. They finally understand the verses. Tell us about Goat versus Fish. Do you be goat? 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 Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be fish? Do you be goat? Do you be goat? Or do you be fish? Because the goat do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. goat or of the land, fish or of the sea, but what kind of goat or fish do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? Do you be goat or a fish? Because the goat do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Now repeat after goat versus fish. Doobie 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 doobie. Get your doobies in the chat. Doobie 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 doobie. Get your doobies ready, goat and fish. We know you like your doobies. Doobie 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 doobie. Doobie doobie now. Doobie 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 goat. Doobie goat, doobie goat, doobie goat, or doobie fish. Doobie fish, doobie goat, or a fish. Because the goat doobie goat and the fish doobie fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Goat versus fish came up to me and said, a goat or a fish, which one do you be? Do you be goat or a fish? 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 Because the goat do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Don't sit on the fence. Don't sit on the fence, don't sit on the fence, don't sit on the fence. Do you be fish, 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 do you be goat, do you be goat, do you be goat, do you be fish, do you be fish, do you be goat, because the goats do be goat and the fish do be fish. The pitiable fence sitter sits on the fence. Not the fence sitter. Not the fence sitter. Not the fence sitter. Oh, but the goat do be goat and the fish do be fish. Do you be goat or a fish? Celebration, celebration for the musications of Goat versus Fish. And while I'm on with the recommendation of Celebration Island, Fatality says, my papa says he doesn't understand the show, but says they love your outfit. Well, listen, any way you can start to comprehend and enjoy Goat vs. Fish, well, that's just the beginning of the verses. You know my favorite part of the outfit? The part where it says Goat vs. Fish. The part where it says Goat vs. Fish! Welcome, Eldon Plays. Sad I missed you at AX. Are you going to any more cons this year? Eldon Plays, you've given 100 bits to Goat vs. Fish, at least. You've been following since 2018. And you say you just understand Goat vs. Fish now? What is it? How is it that you only just now found out about Goat vs. Fish? Let's play some Celebration Island. How is it that you just now found out about Goat vs. Fish? Strange comprehensions. Strange comprehensions. Strange comprehensions. Yes, please. Yes, of course, Adam S. Fall asleep to the stream. You have heard the word but did not understand why it's Goat vs. Fish specifically until now. Celebration, celebration. Fatality says I don't understand it all, to be honest. Well, maybe this will help you. Maddie Mutations. We don't think you've heard this verses before. It's a whole other song of Goat vs. Fish. There's a place we can go while we fish and we goat. It's a place that everybody know as Celebration Island. As Celebration Island. Oh, there's a place we can go while we fish and we goat. It's a place that everybody know as Celebration Island. As Celebration Island. Hoof in hoof and a fin in fin. Where do the verses end and where do they begin? In a celebration, who would win? In Goat vs. Fish. Bit. Oh, there are mountains so tall, Goat can climb them all, and there isn't even any urban sprawl on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island. Oh, there are mountains so tall, Goat can climb them all, and there isn't even any urban sprawl on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island. Take a look at that mighty horn. Climbing the mountains in the early morn. Oh, that goat's fur could use to be shorn. A celebration for goats. Waters so deep, fish can go there to sleep, and the fence sitter won't even make a peep on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island. Now there are waters so deep, fish can go there to sleep, and the fence sitter won't even make a peep on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island. Have a look at that big fin. Bursting through the waves and glistening. Chalk another verses up for the win. celebration for the fish. Oh, there are verses so sweet, we can go there to eat and admire the award-winning feat on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island, Castilian with a subscription. There are verses so sweet, we can go there to eat and admire the award-winning feat on Celebration Island. On Celebration Island. We even hear there's a fence over there for the goat or fish impaired. You can curse on it and you can swear. But nobody cares. The sand is glass and the air is bleach when you're sitting on a fence on Dead End Beach. On Dead End Beach. On Dead End Beach. The clouds are ash and the sea is tar. They're charging $17 for a PBR on Dead End Beach. On Dead End Beach. The mighty verses is out of your reach when you're sitting on a fence on Dead End Beach. It's Celebration Island. It's Celebration Island. Eldon plays with 1,500 bits for Goat vs. Fish. Eldon plays with 1,500 bits for Goat vs. Fish. Yes. Eldon plays with 1,500 bits for Goat vs. Fish. Yeah, 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 yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. Bunkbot with 100 bits. Yes, hello, I'm Fish. Celebration for Fish. Goat and Fish, we're going into a hype training. We're going to a hype training, and you know what that means, Goat and Fish. You know what that means, Goat and Fish. You know what that means, Goat and Fish. I burst this fish last night we fight. 0 versus goat or fish, and I'm gonna be high on the fence by then. I've missed the burst so much, I miss my life. Lonely on the fence, on a timeless fight between goat and fish. Then I think I'm gonna take long as I wish. I might not even choose a goat or a fish. I'm not the one they think I am at home, not fish nor goat. No, I'm a fence-sitter. Fence-sitter, sitting on a fence up here alone. And I think I'm gonna take long as I wish. Might not even choose a goat or a fish. I'm not the one they think I am at home, not fish nor goat. No, I'm a fence-sitter. A fence-sitter, sitting on a fence up here alone. The fence ain't the kind of place to raise your kids. Especially because kids are baby goats, and there'd be no fish to versus them if you did. And all these verses I don't understand. All I see is golden fish. A fence-sitter, a fence-sitter. And I think I'm gonna think long as I wish. I might not even choose a goat or a fish. I'm not the one they think I am at home, not fish nor goat. No, I'm a fence-sitter. A fence-sitter, sitting on a fence up here alone. And I think I'm gonna take long as I wish. Might not even choose a goat or a fish. I'm not the one they think I am at home, not fish nor goat. No, I'm a fence-sitter. A fence-sitter, sitting on a fence up here alone. And I think it's gonna be a long, long verse. I think it's gonna be a long, long verse. And I think it's gonna be a long, long verse. think it's gonna be a long, long verse. Celebration. Celebration for Goat versus Fish, and celebration for 1,500 bits. For 1,500 bits and 100 bits and a song of Fish Center Live from Robbie Hamo 99. Looks like we're not done with the musications yet, Goat and Fish. Bunkbot with 100 bits for Goat, with 100 bits for Goat, celebration for Goat. With 100 bits for Goat, celebration for Goat. Bruised Willis follows Goat versus Fish on Kick and says, hello, I'm a fish. Celebration for Bruised Willis. Celebration for Bruised Willis. Celebration for Bruised Willis. And that weird neighbor is Goat. Celebration for our weird neighbor, the Goat. For our weird neighbor, the Goat. Celebration for our weird neighbor, Goat. And Burly Guy, are you Goat or are you Fish? And we've got Bunkbot with Goat. And we've got Aiden Plays. Oh, my verses. We are looking at you now, and it's Aiden Plays with 1,500 bits. And Jayhawker94 with a big flopping fish. The big flopping fish. It's worth 30 fish points. 30 fish points. And Goat and Fish. Aiden Plays with 1,500. Aiden Plays. And Castile Yeen with a subscription for Goat versus Fish. Castile Yeen, celebration. Are you Goat or are you Fish? Aiden Plays. Are you Goat or Fish? Aiden Plays. You have heard the word of Goat versus Fish. Aiden Plays, doobie, doobie, doobie. Aiden Plays, I finally understand the verses. Aiden Plays, are you Goat or are you Fish? Aiden Plays, are you Goat or are you Fish? Aiden Plays is Goat. Aiden Plays is Goat.
I need you to call the Goat.
Goats, dude. Obnoxious, filthy fucking goats.
And Goat versus Fish, we have 3,431 Goat points. Celebration for Goat. And in previous verses, Castile Yeen has declared Goat. So we're going to give the verses to Goat, and we're going to give a Goat-scription points. Goat-scription points for Goat. 3,931 now for Goat. Goat catching up to Fish. Goat catching up to Fish. Goat now exceeding Fish. Goat now exceeding Fish. But Fish does have one final verses. Fish does have one final verses. And it goes a little verses like this. This verses goes out to Robbie Hamo 99, who celebrates Goat.
What sort of fish are there?
Oh, Fish Center Live, we wish you were around. We sat and we watched as your fish swam around. The fish swam around randomly for the coin, randomly for the coin. Which fish would win the verses? Oh yes, we certainly were enjoying. Oh, now everyone knows just how much we needed those fish. I'm talking about Mom, Tom, Xander, and Thump, Il Hamburger, and Tabitha P. Hellos. Oh, Fish Center Live, we wish you were around. We wish you were around. We sat and we watched as Fish Center left town. We didn't do nothing, did we even try? Did we even try? We sat and we watched as Fish Center went by after 1,000 episodes. Now everyone knows just how much we needed those hosts. I'm talking about Maxie, Relaxie, Matt Herringen, Tina and Joe, and also that other guy, Dave Bonowitz. Fish Center Live, how we wish now that you could see Goat vs. Fish debut live on national TV, on NBC, on AGT. Seems like just yesterverses that Goat vs. Fish called into episode 1000 of Fish Center Live and asked Andrew Zimmern, are you goat or are you fish, or do you prefer eating goat or fish? We think Andrew Zimmern preferred eating goat. Could have been fish. Oh, if there was a Goat vs. Fish game, what genre would it be? We're thinking about every single genre under the sea. Oh, Goat vs. Fish could be an RPG, could be an RPG. Even of the pen and paper variety. Or maybe platformer, Goat and Fish leaping round, leaping round. Or maybe a tournament fighting game, oh, that would be sound. Or maybe Goat vs. Fish is just a way you can gamble your points. Talking about a roulette wheel where you can choose goat or fish. Just don't land on that double fence. everyone knows just how much we needed Fish Center life. Without the Adult Swim streams, I think I know we need GoatVsFish to survive and carry on your memory of Fish Center life. Celebration. 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 Eldon Play says, I'm thinking a couch play game like Duck Game. That's how GoatVsFish has played that versus, but shouldn't it be more like a goat or a fish game? One player's the goat, one player's the fish. They control differently and have their own attack. Co-op levels against fence sitters. It could be. We want there to be GoatVsFish games, and we want there to be GoatVsFish breakfast cereals, and we want there to be GoatVsFish. We want everything to be GoatVsFish. That's why we need you to tip GoatVsFish and subscribe to GoatVsFish, and we need more followers of GoatVsFish, because the more followers we have of GoatVsFish and the more contributions we have to GoatVsFish, the more GoatVsFish we can make. We can make more GoatVsFish. We can make more GoatVsFish. I eat goat and fish for breakfast. Robbie Hamo. I eat goat or fish for breakfast. Consumption of the Space Goat is GoatVsFish cereal, yes. Yes. GoatVsFish only fins? There have been many who have requested a GoatVsFish only fins, but GoatVsFish, there might be a versus. There might be a versus where GoatVsFish could do a GoatVsFish only fins. There could be a versus. There could be a versus. GoatVsFish has just pondered how GoatVsFish could do a GoatVsFish only fins. I have a GoatVsFish Skabo, says BBDH187. Goat or fish or goat or fish. Eldon Plays, appreciation for your 1,500 contribution to GoatVsFish. It's a big versus. It's a big versus. It's huge versus. Because GoatVsFish has been pondering that GoatVsFish wants to get strong. GoatVsFish, those who know GoatVsFish knows that GoatVsFish has dreams of strong. So perhaps GoatVsFish should make an OnlyFans for GoatVsFish, so you can watch the fitness journey of GoatVsFish, and it's like goat versus fishness. So you could see sort of GoatVsFish posing strongly. It's about the strongness of GoatVsFish. It's not about I'm a coy and sexy GoatVsFish. It's not about, I'm a breedable, submissive GoatVsFish. No, it's just about admire the strong of GoatVsFish. Admire the journey of GoatVsFish. But you must, of course, comprehension. Mandy Mutation says, I thought maybe you would post pictures of lewd fish and goats. Now that could be a versus. We could just post a picture of fully erect goat and naked fish. We could just post pictures of goat and fish and say, here's a naked goat and here's a naked fish. Eldon Plays with 100 bits. Celebration. 100 bits for goat. 100 bits for goat. It's difficult verses, goat and fish. It's difficult verses. You may think, goat versus fish. Just make an OnlyFins goat versus fish. Just make an OnlyFins goat versus fish. Eldon plays 100 bits. Eldon plays 100 bits. Aiden. Oh, my verses. Aiden plays. Aiden plays. But for Goat vs. Fish to make an OnlyFins, it would take Goat vs. Fish like a million verses. It would have to be up to the standards of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish already has a Patreon, which is really too neglected for Goat vs. Fish. Really too neglected for Goat vs. Fish. There's so much to be done for Goat vs. Fish. There's so much to be done for Goat vs. Fish, and we appreciation that you want more Goat vs. Fish. Robbie Hamo 99, are you goat or fish? Are you goat or are you fish? We just need a whole team of goat or fish around Goat vs. Fish to help Goat vs. Fish produce more Goat vs. Fish. We need a team around Goat vs. Fish. And Goat vs. Fish tried to do this. Goat vs. Fish tried to make a team for Goat vs. Fish. And the last verse is that Goat vs. Fish tried to make a team for Goat vs. Fish. Then there was someone who was filming Goat vs. Fish, and then they decided to hold all of the film and audio hostage unless Goat vs. Fish paid them $15,000 versus American dollars, and then it all got deleted on Goat vs. Fish. So that made Goat vs. Fish feel pretty fence. Made Goat vs. Fish feel pretty fence about collaboration. But we know that to expand Goat vs. Fish, we need to expand the team of Goat vs. Fish. We need to expand the team of Goat vs. Fish. We need to expand the team of Goat vs. Fish. And you all have done so much for Goat vs. Fish. Wow Mom has made giant goat and fish. And you are all part of Goat vs. Fish. But we also need to increase the following of Goat vs. Fish. We need to increase the following of Goat vs. Fish. It's a scary verses. It's a very scary verses out there, Goat and Fish. It's a very scary verses. But Goat vs. Fish does not quit. Goat vs. Fish. I follow Goat vs. Fish on all social media at Goat vs. Fish Celebration. Celebration, Goat and Fish. It's like they want to destroy Goat vs. Fish. But we won't let them. We won't let them. No, no, no. How about Goat vs. Fish dating sim? Excellent verses. Aiden plays excellent verses. How about Goat vs. Fish dating simulation? How's this for a Goat vs. Fish dating simulation? You actually get to go on a date with Goat vs. Fish. How about that? How about a simulation where someone actually dates Goat vs. Fish? Wow. Wow, it would be like you're really dating Goat vs. Fish. Amazing verses. Goat vs. Fish should have a mini Goat vs. Fish. We comprehension. Do we goat? Do we be goat? Do we go on a date with you or the goat or the fish? Well, if your Goat vs. Fish was talking about a dating simulation where you simulate a date with Goat vs. Fish and you're just dating Goat vs. Fish. And it's like, oh, that's what the Goat vs. Fish dating simulator would be like. It's like, wow. It's like if I were actually dating Goat vs. Fish. But yes, you could do a goat dating simulation where you go to the petting zoo and you have a goat and then you do dine together, you wine together, and then you enjoin together and you break up together and then you die together. And then you remember the fond verses together forever. That reminds Goat vs. Fish of a verses. That reminds Goat vs. Fish of a verses. So we're going to play one more song of Goat vs. Fish. By the Fence Sitters. There's so many bands called the Fence Sitters. Where does the art stop and the real life begin? There's no such fence as real life. Please. Please. real life. Is this the real verse? Is this just fence sitting? Born in a landslide, no escape from the fishy sea. Look to the skies, look up to the high-rise fence. I'm just a poor goat, nobody versus me, because it's easy fish, easy goat, little fish, little goat. Everywhere the fence stands doesn't really versus a fish. Versus fish. Fish. But that's not the verses that Goat versus Fish was even going to sing. We were going to sing a different verses. We're going to sing a verses that goes like this. We're going to sing a verses. We're going to sing verses. We're going to sing a verses that Goat versus Fish. We're going to sing a verses that goes more like this. Goat versus Fish teased me with a false verses. Goat versus Fish would never tell you a false verses. Goat versus Fish would never tell you a false verses. Never. Robbie Hamill, we asked you if you were goat or if you were fish. We so asked you if you were a goat or if you were a fish. Don't make like we didn't. Goat versus fish, I know it's true. I think about the goat and fish. They only verses to think about the goat you verse and versus fish. So versey together. If I should versus you in best defense and say that you belong to goat, that versus fish, imagine how the verse would be. So very goat, so versey together. I can't see me versing nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, fishy, the verses are true for all my verses. Goat versus fish, once more verses, goat versus fish. Well, I can't see me versing nobody but you for all my life. When you're with me, fishy, the seas appear blue for all my verses. Goat and fish and goat, no matter how the goat do climb and fish do float, the only one for me is fish to versus you, so versey together. Oh, I can't see me versing nobody but goat for all my verses. When you're with me, goaty, the verses are true for all my verses. Oh, goat and fish and goat, no matter how they sit on fences, it's written wrote that goat will always versus fish and fish versus goat, so verses forever. Goat! Fish! Fish and goat and fish. No matter how they sit on fence, they only wish that they could be a goat or fish or goat. So verses together. So verses together. So verses together. Now is the verses. Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you fish? A goat or fish, a goat or fish. So are you fish or are you goat? Yes, are you fish or are you goat? Are you fish or are you goat? Are you fish or are you goat? Or are you fish or are you goat? Or are you fish or are you goat? Because it's goat versus fish and it's live on the stage and it's all of the rage and it was just seen on live TV on NBC on AGT on season 19 on channel 3. I mean channel 4. What could you truly ask for anything more? Except more goat versus fish, except more goat versus fish. Celebration! Celebration for goat versus fish. It's a heavy versus. Oh, it's a heavy versus, this versus. So are you fish, or are you goat? Or are you fish, or are you goat? Okay, goat and fish. Okay, goat and fish. Aiden plays fish, goat, fish, goat, fish, goat, fish, goat. Fish, goat. Fish. Fish and goat. Fish and goat. So are you goat or are you fish? So are you fish or are you goat? We think it's been a fine versus. Why can't we all just be fence sitter, says PNG Crisis.
My bum is on the rail. Bum is on the rail. Look at me. My bum is on the rail.
Would goat date fish? Would goat date fish? Well, it depends on the goat and it depends on the fish. We know that goat and fish have dated before. Goat and fish have even formed in unity of goatfish before. There have even been goat and fish who read vows to one another, and it's like, is this the little goat I versissed? Is this a little fish at play? Look how they versus one another in their way. How did goat get to be so horny? How did fish come to be so wet? Is this a versus we shall not forget? Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Through the gills and ears, one versus following another. Don't ever sit upon the fence. One versus following another, laden with goatliness and fish. Goat versus fish, goat versus fish, through the gills and ears. One versus following another, laden with goatliness and fish. Does goat versus fish have a nemesis? Well, we do wish that unpaid intern of goat versus fish would start doing some verses around here. Does goat versus fish have a nemesis? Well, maybe AGT is the nemesis of goat versus fish. It's the fence sitter who rejects goat versus fish. PNG Chris, are you goat or are you fish? The fence sitter that rejects goat versus fish wishes they were the nemesis of goat versus fish, but really the nemesis of goat versus fish is goat if we are fish and fish if we are goat. But those fence sitters, they do try to annoy goat versus fish. They do try to annoy goat versus fish. Does the statue of the thinker think of goat versus fish? Yes. Yes, it does. Oh, this reminds goat versus fish. This was reminding goat versus fish. We need to... Goat versus fish. We need stream segments. Goat versus fish. We need to remind ourselves of this versus of stream segments. Because as we are going to do more living streams, of course we love the improvisation of goat versus fish. We love the improvisation of goat versus fish. So let's rename this versus. Let's rename this versus to stream segments. So what's a stream segment on goat versus fish? Goat and fish. Goat and fish. Let's take a brief versus and name some stream segments on goat versus fish. It's 227 in the verses. Yes, it's forever goat versus fish. PNG Chris, are you goat or fish? Paradox Sanch with the fish. Celebration for fish. Adam S., do you think Goat vs. Fish is in a place called Ohio? Goat vs. Fish is a place called Los Angeles. Imo Weave the Simp, celebration. We'll see you next verses. Thank you for your participation in Goat vs. Fish. So segments on Goat vs. Fish. Segments on Goat vs. Fish include verses like Play Musications. Play Musications is a stream segment on Goat vs. Fish. Review social media fodder is a versus of segments of Goat vs. Fish. Goat vs. Fish news is a segment of Goat vs. Fish. Meditation is a segment of Goat vs. Fish. That Goat vs. Fish. We have not done much meditation in recent verses. Meditation is a segment of Goat vs. Fish, and so is philosophication. Goat vs. Fish used to have a verses called philosophication, where we would just play harmonious musications and you would just be able to ask questions to Goat vs. Fish and we would just have a nice philosophication type conversation. Shadow Wizard Money Gang. We love casting spells. Goat and Fish. The chatters on YouTube and Kick, they just say the fanciest things to Goat vs. Fish. Viewer Collins, are you goat or are you fish? PNG Chris says, I am a fish. I heard from Terry Crews that Sofia Vergara is a fish as well, but was intimidated by Howie's horniness because they're goat. How did you hear this, PNG Chris? What is your claim to this evidence? Celebration Terry Crews is goat. PNG Chris, your fish has been written in the verses. Lostifications, and gamifications. Marbles is a segment on Goat vs. Fish. Oh, my verses. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Celebration. Okay, that's enough of that. Okay, that's enough of that verses. 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 Oh, and we have call-in, Goat vs. Fish call-in segment. Goat vs. Fish thinks we should definitely bring back the... Goat vs. Fish thinks we should definitely bring back the Goat vs. Fish call-in segment. And of course, counting Goat and Fish is a classic segment that we do kind of every verses. We kind of do every verses. Yes, viewer call-ins are great. They can be. Viewer Collins is claiming fish. Celebration for fish. A marble versus is very patriotism. America sure could use some brotherhood right now. Oh, Goat vs. Fish. Are we really going to make Goat vs. Fish sing another verses? Is that verses in the song list of Goat vs. Fish? It's not. Okay, we need to put this song in the song list of Goat vs. Fish. We need to put this song in the verses of Goat vs. that song list of Goat vs. Fish. And this verse is Goat vs. Fish. And we'll call this a folk verses creation. So we'll just sing this verses. We'll just sing this verses just because we should remember it on Goat vs. Fish. Just because we should remember it. This is a very Goat vs. Fish type song. So we should sing it on Goat vs. Fish just so we remember the verses. Just so we remember the verses. Goat vs. Fish. If you're a goat or a fish and you like a fine verses, get on down to Willie Town. That is a fine verses. We do like that verses. We do like that verses very much. We like that verses very much. Like that verses very much. But this is a whole other verses. What has happened? Ah. Goat vs. Fish, I saw you like a million verses ago at Kill Tony live at the Comedy Store Los Angeles celebration. Viewer call-ins, did you know that Goat vs. Fish has been on America's Got Talent now? Kill Tony is like America's Got Talent Jr. The very mainstream Kill Tony had about the same reaction to Goat vs. Fish as America's Got Talent did to Goat vs. Fish. Pretty much the same verses. If you're a goat or a fish and you like to find verses, get on down to Willie Town. If you're a goat or a fish and you like to find verses, get on down to Willie Town. See Miss Lead Buddha Goat slapping that bass and Shrimpy Moe getting in your face and Ralph Mouthfish is banging on a gong and everybody's just a getting along and along and along and along and along and along. Get on down to Willie Town. Goat vs. Fish, the best verses around. Get on down to Willie Town. Okay, Goat and Fish. Oh, we were at the start of the verses. If I had a goat, I'd verses in the morning, I'd verses in the evening, all over this goat land. I'd verses out danger, I'd verses out warning, I'd verses out of verses between my goats and my fishes. All over goat land. If I were a fish, I'd verse goat in the morning, I'd verse goat in the evening, all over the sea. I'd verses out dangerous goat, I'd verses out warnings about goat, I'd verses out verses between my fishes and my goats. All over this verses. If I sat on the fence, I'd sit there in the verses. I'd sit there on the goats and fishes and never verses. I'd sit I just sit there and I just not choose a goat or a fish. I'd sit there and stop the verses of the goats and the fishes all over this fence. Well, I got a goat and I got a fish and I've got a verses to sing all over this verses. It's a verses of justice, it's a verses of freedom, it's a verses of love between my goats and my fishes. All over this verses. So that's a versus. That's a versus about goat and fish. That's a versus about goat and fish. That's a versus about goat and about fish. That's a versus about goat and fish. Oh, it's a great versus. I trusted you. 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 Are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat? Or are you fish? Get Hep on YouTube who said you trusted Goat versus Fish. Are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat? Or are you fish? Get hep. Get hep on YouTube. Are you goat? Or are you fish? Are you goat or fish? You must remember that these things are not what make Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish comes from within you. Always. Goat versus Fish is a hero for bringing goat and fish together. Oh, yes. We're bringing goat and fish together. So let's have a look at the verses. We got a lot of subscriptions from Goat. Goat are now domination. Goat are now domination. And you know what that means. It means things have changed. Things have changed. Oh, the fish, the fish, the fish, the fish. They thought they had the triumph in the verses, yes. But now go dismount the fish. Oh, and boom, and goat on the verses now. Goat, goat, goat on the verses now. Fish, fish tried to verse, but then the goat got in fish's throat and and fish swam away. Goat won today, yes, and goat, 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 goat versus the fish, and the fish are now versing the goat. Goat winning against the fish. Are you goat or a fish? Oh, oh, goat, yes. Yes, goat. Goat winning now. Goat gang, rise up! Goat gang, rise up! Fish in shambles! Fish in shambles! Fish in shambles! Fish in shambles, burnt fish, fish! Maddie Mutations loves the fish, but look at what has happened. Magic Mutations, we think you deserve versus a special commendations. So we're going to give you a special versus. As a special versus, Maddie Mutations shall receive the role of artist here on GoatVsFish. Maddie Mutations, give us a chat. Give us a chat. Give us a chat. And there you are. That little verses next to your name. Why, GoatVsFish gave it to you. GoatVsFish gave it to you. Compensation? Oh. Maybe not that much versus. It's a very different kind of versus. It's a very different kind of versus. Versable. I deserve to win nothing. You want nothing? You want nothing from GoatVsFish? You want nothing from GoatVsFish? You want nothing from GoatVsFish? Oh. Well, we weren't expecting that on GoatVsFish. This would be a fun versus. GoatVsFish should come here. It should come here more often. This would be sort of the inverse versus. The inverse of the previous verses. This would be a nice place to stream GoatVsFish. This would be a nice place to stream GoatVsFish. Don't you versus? Don't you versus? Don't you versus? GoatVsFish thinks so. Goat versus Fish thinks so. Robbie Hamo, in honor of your services to Goat versus Fish, you get
Nothing.
And welcome back to Goat versus Fish. So Goat and Fish, so Goat and celebration! Okay, Goat and Fish. It's getting lately on Goat versus Fish. It's getting lately on Goat versus Fish. It's getting lately on Goat versus Fish. And you know what that means. We know that some of you just love playing marbles on Goat versus Fish. So we'll give you just a little verses. How did I get it? Well, Goat vs. Fish went into the streamer dashboard of Goat vs. Fish, and then Goat vs. Fish. And then Goat vs. Fish gave you the verses. That's all that happened on Goat vs. Fish. We just gave you the verses. Ah! That's not what was supposed to happen on Goat vs. Fish. Fancy Island. What's this? Fence that. Goat versus Fish. Marbleization. Goat versus Fish. Are you a goat or are you fish? Are you goat or are you a fish? Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Okay, Goat and Fish. Oh no. So if we're going to do marbleization in the chat, can we get some exclamation play in the chat for those who want to play marbleization on stream? Can we get some exclamation play in the chat for those of you who want to do this versus? Can we get some exclamation play in the chat for those of you who want to do this versus? For those of you who want this versus. For those of you who crave this versus. How play? Well, you type exclamation play. It's a totally random versus, except it's totally rigged by Goat versus Fish. That's the verses. So, we race in the name of Goat versus Fish and all that is verses. In the name of Goat versus Fish and all that is verses. In the name of Goat versus Fish and all that is verses. In the name of Goat versus Fish and all that is verses. Goat versus Fish, Goat versus Fish. You just wait a versus. You just wait a versus. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish now. Goat versus Fish. Goat versus Fish now. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Goat versus fish. Forgive goat versus fish. We're just doing a few. We're just tidying up. We're just tidying up the verses. Okay. Okay. This is what you wanted. Goat versus fish. And because it will now be a marbles type stream on Goat versus Fish, marbleization on stream really is only fun for Goat and Fish who are watching Goat versus Fish on Twitch. And so, Goat and Fish, we think we are going to retire the Kick and YouTube versions of this stream. And we are just going to do a Twitch verse. So we'll see you on the next verses, YouTube and also Kick. Thank you for being part of Goat versus Fish. Subscribe to Goat versus Fish, follow Goat versus Fish, and ask everyone you know, are you goat or are you fish? Don't sit on the fence now. This has been a versus of Goat versus Fish. Oh, all right, we'll give you one more verses. We'll give you one more verses. We'll give you one more verses. Okay. Celebration for Goat versus Fish. Celebration for Goat versus Fish.